Welcome to The Human Experience, a podcast about the stories we live out every day and the importance of championing the vulnerability and courage of the storyteller. I'm your host, Jennifer Peterkin, and it was through my own lived story of experiencing domestic violence that this podcast was created. By traveling the globe and interviewing each guest in person, I am convinced now more than ever that stories have the power to change the world. You can join our community of storytellers by subscribing, leaving a rating and review, signing up for my newsletter, following me on Instagram, and more. Thank you for being here. In a world full of noise, to listen with intention is an act of resistance.
I agree. Well, thank you for sharing your story and making room for other stories. It's huge.
Thanks. Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate that. And sitting in your home in North Carolina with your poor jet-lagged brain, and I'm making you sit down with me and tell me about your story. You just got back from Hungary, correct?
Yes.
With your grandmother?
Yes.
That's such a special trip.
Yes, it was amazing. It was amazing.
Was that your first time to Hungary?
Yeah, that was my first time and her first time, even though she's traveled the world. She's 95. But she put off going to Hungary. Mm-hmm. So it was very special to be able to go with her this time.
It's so impressive that at 95 years old, she traveled that far.
Right.
Like that's what I hope for myself.
Yes. She's an inspiration.
Yeah,
you
truly. I want to be her when I grow up, for sure.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Well, I'm here to hear your story. So when I ask you, what is your story? What does that mean to you? Where would you start that?
Mm-hmm. So for me, my story has a very specific beginning in the sense that there was a moment, a tragedy, a moment that kind of wiped me clean as a person, that I didn't know who I was. And I didn't know who my future was, was going to be. So that's usually where my story begins, even though there's story before that.
Sure.
All my reflection on my childhood is through the lens of that immediate, that moment. So my story really began on the night of June 8th, 1994. I was 20, and I was living in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is on the coast, in the southeastern region, and had only lived in North Carolina for about 9 months, moving from California, where I was born and raised.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was born and raised in California. Didn't know what I wanted to do, and then had a chance. Somebody was like, I'm going to go to Wilmington because they have a film industry there, and was like, I'm going to try to get into the film industry through there instead of Hollywood. And I was a little lost. So I was like, well, I'll go for a while and just hang out in North Carolina on the beach. And that was in 1994, so I'm still here.
Stuck around.
Stuck around. But in June 8th, June 8th, 1994, I was actually laying in bed. I think I was reading, and the phone rang. This is pre-cell phone, so I got up and went to the kitchen and got the phone, and it was a friend of mine who had just got off of work, and he had gotten off work early. And he was like, we need to go out. Let's go out. I was like, I don't know if I want to go out. And he's like, we need to go out. We never go out. I was like, okay. And so I called my boyfriend at the time, and he was taking a summer school chemistry class. And he was like, I can't go out. I'm summer school. I just can't do it. And then another friend of ours, my roommate, wasn't home. She was working. And so the two of us went out, and we went out dancing. And even though I was 20, I was served. So we were dancing and drinking and bar hopping to 3 different places. It ended up being, and talking and laughing and having a great time. And then it was June 9th, so it was definitely after midnight. It was before closing. We left, and we were walking to his car. And so he threw me the keys as we were walking. And then I threw them back to him, and we kind of had this little, no, you drive. And it wasn't a, I'm too drunk, you should drive. It was a, no, you drive, just a fun tossing, because he had a 300Z, which is a fun car to drive. And so he's like, you drive. And it just ended up that by the time we got to the car, I was on the side of the driver's seat, and he threw the keys over the hood and got in the car. And so we got in the car, went through some neighborhoods, on some back roads, And then at one point, so Wilmington's flat and not very curvy at all. Like it's a very, it's almost at zero ocean level for the most part of the whole thing. So, but we were going around a left corner and I lost control of the car and it hit a pole. So, and the only reason I really have this memory is because something like that sobers you completely. I'm sure if I made it home, I wouldn't have remembered the drive because I had been, my blood alcohol was, I can't remember, but it was at least double, if not more, of what the legal limit was. So I don't remember. I remember feeling the inertia of, the car. And so it was a left-hand turn. So his side got the brunt. And when I woke up, I just had this immediate, where was I? And I could see the car and I could see my hands and I could just I can checking my immediate surroundings. And then when I looked over, he was laying on the center console and all I could see was the back of his head. And at that moment, I was like, okay, you don't touch somebody that's hurt. You don't move them. And so I leaned down and I could hear that he was breathing, but he was breathing through what I assumed was blood because it was a curdling breath. And then I started, of course, get up. We got to get out. We got to get out of the car. And he didn't move. Somebody in there's apartment complex right there called. So when I got out of the car and just kind of stood there. And that person came out and they had called. And so they obviously put me in the police car and I went to jail that night. And he went to the hospital and was in a coma for 4 months and suffered a brain injury that altered his life. So he had a stroke while he was in a coma. When the part of the brain, which I don't know all the medical terms, but he lost that kind of he forgot how to walk and forgot how to talk. He had his personality, so he didn't lose who he was as a person. He lost memory, about 6 months of memory. So since I'd only known him about 6 to 9 months, he probably didn't remember me as all that much. Oh, wow. I don't know how much he did, but he didn't remember that night. So so he woke up 4 months later and began his trajectory of healing and stuff. And I waited to see, because they had charged me with manslaughter, or I had a pending manslaughter charge, waiting to see what happened with him. So that was my first year.
Wow.
Yeah.
First of all, I just want to thank you and applaud you for your candor in telling this story, because I'm sure even now it's not an easy story to tell. But I also think it's somebody can relate to it on some level, And so I think it's an important story to tell. And I do believe in, responsibility and accountability. And the way that you've chosen to do that is by telling this story. And I think that I told you before, not everybody is willing or able to do that. But the fact that you are, I think, speaks volumes. So thank you, because, again, even still, I'm sure this is not an easy path to walk down. When the police came, what was kind of your initial reaction when, because you said it instantly sobered you. What's kind of running through your mind when the police show up?
Well, there's two things. Before the police showed up and I was standing in the middle of the road looking down the road to where we were supposed to have driven, I just wanted to be in my bed. I was like, I just want to be in my bed. Everything would be okay. If I was just in my bed right now, this would be okay. And then the second piece when they showed up was I didn't mean to. And that was pretty much it. I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah.
So those are my two. Yeah. Just want to be home and have it not happen. Have that next moment, not this moment, the next one that was supposed to happen in my mind happen. And then just immediately, I didn't mean to, the remorse coming.
Yeah.
And then in the jail cell, it was just more and more of that I didn't mean to. And a lot of what just happened. Like my brain's like, what just happened?
Yeah, trying to process.
Like just the simplest question of what just happened.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was, it.
Yeah.
Trying to figure that out. And so those were my immediate thoughts.
I think a lot of us don't necessarily have moments in our lives where in that moment we realize how much it's going to change our lives. But I imagine that's one of those moments.
Oh, yeah.
And then it makes you think about how, like, all of the times that we do things that could go wrong and they don't, right? And like how lucky or fortunate or blessed, whatever word you want to put in there, we are because things happened to go the right way. We happened to, quote unquote, get away with it.
Yeah.
And, I mean that on a spectrum of things, right?
Of course.
So that's kind of what's running through my mind right now as I imagine it's like it could have gone so differently.
So many ways.
Yeah. It could have been so different, like very easily. It's not hard to imagine how you could have made it home safely and went to bed and woken up the next day and everything would have gone on as normal. When you get to jail, who are you calling?
I didn't call anyone that night. I guess they say you get a phone call.
Okay. Is that not true?
But it wasn't in this case.
Okay.
At least not then. So I didn't call anyone that I remember. How about that? So my memory is going to the jail cell and like sitting there and, all the things they do to look you over before they give you the orange jumpsuit, strip you down and all of that. Even though later I was thinking, I didn't plan to go to jail tonight. What do you think I have stuck,
right.
But it's their protocol and
right.
It is, humiliating. And I just was kind of moment by moment then. And then I went, so I had gotten the morning and then there was a handful of us that were taken to the courtroom the next morning to kind of your initial, and again, I don't know the legal terms. You go and they tell you have a $10,000 bond or whatever it is. And I guess your initial charges. So I did that and a friend of mine was sitting in the seat out and I didn't expect her to be there. And so I think what happened was that we didn't make it home. And so people started investigating and found out what happened. So I don't have that memory of I'm still friends with the one friend that was in not the stands, but in the seats. So I should ask her again because I know they've told me, but I don't have any idea. But I believe that that's how it went down is that we just didn't come home. And so they started investigating.
At this point, do you know where your other friend is that was also in the car?
The friend in the car. I know he went to the hospital because I know that they had to pry open. The last memory I have of seeing is them prying open his car door and the ambulance was there. And he wasn't moving. So I knew he was going to the hospital. That wasn't a question. For me, I knew that was the case.
Yeah.
So and then my friends bailed me out of jail. So because my family was in California, I moved there with one person, kind of a summer fling, which was just a fling. But within 2 months, he was already doing something else. And so all the friends that I had made were ones that I'd only known for 6 to 9 months, whatever. And so, and my family wasn't there or anybody that I'd known for a long time. But they bailed me out and brought me home. And my boyfriend's mom made me chicken soup. And I still have a blanket she put on me that day. So they took care of me that next morning. And afterwards, as much as people can do, you never know what's going on inside somebody's mind.
Sure.
And even in moments like that, you don't know what's going on in your mind for a while,
True.
So that was the immediate aftermath, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's really poignant and a great show of the depth of compassion that we can have as human beings, that was your friend's response to you. Because nobody was sitting there and telling you like, oh, it's okay. Like, it's not a big deal. It's, there wasn't anything that people were trying to make it better in that way, but they saw a need that you were still a person who's hurting and needed comfort. And it didn't take away from somebody else that they also needed help and comfort to extend compassion to you in that moment. Especially only knowing people for a few months. That's, I think it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. They're remarkable people. And some of them, one, I'm more in contact than others, but I know if I saw, that's time and space with any friendships, right? And we all work together in a restaurant. So that's kind of what happens anyway.
Yeah.
But I know if I saw them or when I have run into them, when, it's, there's no, it's one of those like no time has passed kind of things.
Sure.
But I agree with you. It was a great show of compassion and care that they came and got the money together and, and showed, and just showed up and brought me home and took care of me and those, especially those first few days.
Yeah. So I know that sometimes the legal system can take kind of a long time. What is then the process to move through that? Like, you heard your initial charges, but then what happens after that?
Well, they wanted to wait a year.
Oh.
To see what had happened. So, or one, they wanted to see if he woke up, right? So that was 4 months later. But I didn't have my court date until the following summer. Like, I think it was August. So it had been 13, 14 months. And I don't know. I think that was because they really wanted to see, because just coming out of a coma, that doesn't mean he's not going to, they don't know the extent of the damages or the injuries, I should say is a better word. But so they wanted to wait a year. So I had what I call my limbo year of not knowing what was going to happen, because the initial charge would have put me in prison. I mean, if I had the manslaughter charge, I think it would have gone up to, it was like a 2 to 6 year maybe, if I recall. So it was kind of like, did I just do something that's going to put me in prison for this many years? And how am I going to handle that? So that was an interesting year. It was tough, obviously. At the same time, I also did what I could just to keep going, which I did, And then we had the court date, and I just had a appointed lawyer because my family, I don't come from money or people that know how to work within the judicial system. So I had a court-appointed lawyer, he didn't do anything really. And so my initial sentence was for 2 years in prison. And then he appealed it, which, is obviously very common. So I got 2 weeks in jail, county, and then 4 years of probation, plus fines and community service. And if I had gotten any charges within those 4 years, then I would have gone to 2 years. I would have gone to prison for 2 years. Oh, so it's like that, it hangs over your head. While you're on probation, your initial sentence hangs over your head. So if you violate it, then it kicks in. Yeah. So for 4 years after that, I had that kind of hanging over my head. Yeah. And that's what I was charged. Those were my charges.
So really interesting. The waiting a year, I'm just trying to imagine, and you've already spoken to this briefly, but just trying to imagine knowing that that's coming and knowing what could happen and trying to just go on as, quote unquote normal. Like, what does normal even mean at that point, right? Yeah. So, how would you say that your life, how you lived your life, drastically changed after that night in terms of like the things that you were doing day to day just because this was hanging over your head and this was such a huge like left turn in your life? Or were you trying to, you know, live, again, I want to put quotes around, like normal and just pretend like it wasn't coming to a degree?
That's a good question. Because I think part of my path has always been, not always, since that day, been living two different paths at the same time. Because one path was deeply rooted in shame, deeply rooted in that I have proven to the world, as if it is written in stone, that I am not a good person and that I'm not worth it. And then the other path was, but there's these great philosophers and teachers that tell that everybody deserves a second chance and that people make mistakes and that everybody's valuable and worth it. And so those two narratives I have lived with pretty much ever since then. Now I'm here now because the shame one is smaller, but as you can see when I still talk, it's there, right? So, you know, luckily the you deserve a second chance and is stronger, much stronger. So I think even after that, I was trying to live my normalcy because it helped me feel like I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
At the same time, I had zero idea. Like, I mean, it was almost an autopilot. I just went through the motions. I mean, I was waiting tables, you know, and that's a kind of job that, you know, you talk to people and stuff. But when you're moving around, it's all autopilot anyway, or kind of. At least, you know what I mean? You get into the groove of any work. And I still wanted to, you know, have my friends and feel some sort of happiness. So I did hang out with my friends and we had a good, you know, but I think the interior was just melting and just lost, you know, but I kept going. And I am an optimistic person. And I've learned about post-traumatic growth in the I guess it's a newer last 10 years.
Okay.
But I believe that I'm one of those people that actually experienced post-traumatic growth. I don't remember all the things, but one of them is you need to be an optimistic person. So I believed beyond, I'm like, I know I feel this way, but I believe that this isn't the only way. Like, this is just the beginning of my process. So it was dual. I mean, it really was. There was a moment, though, so that I was in a situation, I was camping, I was at a concert, and somebody was like, let's just run away. Like, let's go. Because I like, you know, I like the Grateful Dead. And he was like, we're going to get on the bus. He's like, I have a warrant out for my arrest too. Just come with me. And like, let's go. And I remember I was sitting there and it had never occurred to me not to go to court, right? It never occurred to me to run away from it. That moment, I'm so thankful that I was in a situation that somebody put that out as an option because it allowed me to understand my intentionality and choices. And I had already decided, well, I mean, I guess that moment helped me decide. I was either going to run away, which meant I was probably going to die young. I was going to go ahead and just go off the deep end and just ignore all of this pain and numb it with whatever I was going to numb it with and just go. Or I was going to make it the intentionality to do the work and to do whatever that work meant, which I had no idea what that looked like, but that I was going to make something right and intentional about my life and to try to make right with what had happened. And so I'm really thankful for that opportunity to make that kind of decision. And one of the big things that helped me make it, I mean, except for the fact that I'm not somebody that runs away, was the fact that I know you can't run away. I was like, you want to go to Costa Rica? Everything that's wrong right now, not that moment, is in my head. I can never run away from what happened. I'll never be able to leave it, ever. No matter what I did, I'd have to die. That's why I was like, I will go off the deep end and I will jump off buildings, or I will be crazy. You know, I will go and just live to the limit because death would be the only way to get away from what's going on inside my head and my heart. So I knew that wasn't an option. But it helped me be intentional, not just surviving it and being like, one day, I said, no, I'm going to do something to make this more.
Yeah.
Make this not worth it, because that's not the right word, obviously, but make it, I don't know. So it's just not something that happened that was horrible.
Yeah. Well,
not just
again, I think, you speak to your intention in moving forward, because you can't change the past. And that sounds like a cop-out until you start talking about the fact that, but you can change everything after it. And if you do that, then that does speak to your intention and your character.
Yeah.
When you were describing your kind of parallel lives, I just the angel and devil on your shoulder imagery came to mind. And I would say shame is akin to the devil. It is a horribly, horribly destructive thing that is very all-encompassing. And I think it's really important that you pointed out that you realize, I also think it's pretty incredible that you realized in that moment that if you were to run away, nothing would actually change for you, because it wasn't about the court. It wasn't about jail. It wasn't about any of that. It was about what you had to fix in you, because all of the other external stuff is to a degree temporary, right?
Yep.
And not to dismiss that in any way, but yeah, the work has to be done inside of you. And I think that, to know it at that point, to not have to go further and further down that path until you realize that, if I don't turn around now, I'm never going to turn around. I think that's pretty incredible. When I speak to people in recovery, or, have friends in recovery, a lot of it is like, well, I had to hit rock bottom before I could change. And rock bottom is different for every person, right? And so and I think it kind of is a terrible term because it brings a negative connotation, but it's your change point, right? It's whatever flips that switch in your brain that says, all right, I'm awake now, and I realize that if I don't do something, I'm not going to be here anymore. So you're going through, you're waiting during this year, you're in limbo, you're trying to live as normally as you can, realizing the work that you have to do. Now, at this point, are you realizing internally, or are you starting the work that you have to do, or are you just kind of waiting on hold?
Waiting. Yeah. It was on hold, because I didn't know if the work was going to be done while I was in prison or not. So I was just kind of waiting, and
that's a punishment kind of in and of itself, that not knowing. So how was, your family's in California. How do you tell them what's going on in your life? Are you close with your family?
Well, before I go there, I want to say one thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned the angel and the devil.
Yeah.
I had an angel pendant, and one of my colleagues, his brother was a jeweler, and I asked him to cast it as an earring and then carve a devil. And so I had angel and devil earrings.
Did you really?
When I was, that's like after the court date, that was my gift to myself for after my 2 weeks in jail. I was like, I need to mark this other side of me that I know that exists. So I just wanted to, when you said that, I was like, yes, exactly that. That's what they are, sitting on your shoulders.
Yeah.
So I called my mother that first morning after I was bailed out. And that, am I close with my family? Yes. My family also, there's also, what is it? I come from a very independent and you take care of your stuff family. And I admired that. At the same time, my mom had her own sets of pains and traumas.
Sure.
And so when I called, I expected her and I wanted her to just say, I'll be there. Just let me, And she didn't. She did ask, do you want me to come? But in that moment, it's not what I needed. And I didn't know how to say just yes.
Yeah.
Because what I wanted was for her to just say, I'll be there. And so I was like, no, don't worry about it. And, so that both of us didn't meet the moment as a mother and daughter. But so I didn't see her for a year. And my dad was already out of the picture. My dad, that's a whole other podcast. It's not where I don't mind talking about it. There's just he just basically, when I turned 18, he was like, I'm done. And I never want to talk to anybody again. So, and my sister, I have a sister who's older and we're closer now. And we were never like mean or hated each other, but time and she's older and, I was born. And so she was like, who are you? That kind of stuff, normal sister things.
Yeah.
But we're closer now, definitely. And I think people also don't know how to handle that kind of situation because one of the things I ran into very early on, even with my friends after the initial aftermath, and life goes on, happens with anybody that goes through a trauma or whatever it is, life goes on for everybody else. And you're just sitting there and life's not going on in the same way. And that's just typical. And I understand. But with this kind of thing, because so many people, it's like, man, that could have been me. How many times was I out drinking with someone, right? Like, it could have been me. It could have been me. And because drinking and driving specifically is like a social contract, but it's also happens more than anybody, more than anybody would like to admit. Yes. And my grandfather telling me stories, he's like, we didn't wear seatbelts, we were drunk all the time,
Yeah.
That kind of stuff that in some ways when they're like, but it wasn't your fault, you didn't mean to. I think, and even in my own brain, if I were to think of that of somebody beforehand, and that makes you think everything well, of course she's okay. She didn't mean to do that. So she must be okay. Do you know what I mean? I think it becomes their own reassurance.
Yeah.
Because I didn't go out and intentionally do something.
Sure.
It was, or intentionally hurt my friend. So I think it's complicated in that way. And I think that's one of the reasons we don't talk about it and hear from this side of my story as much, because it's so wrapped up in what society's norms are and how people view what an accident means actually, and how do you just rectify all of that? And then, I've done this before, but luckily one of those, like you said, I woke up in my bed. So thank goodness that happens a lot. And so it's just complicated. And I didn't know how to reach out and say, I need help.
Yeah.
Because I also didn't believe I deserved help. So the shame was immediate. It was guilt didn't even really come up. It just went straight to shame.
Yeah.
And shame will tell you that, it will make you hide. It will tell you you don't need anything. It'll tell you that, So I didn't believe I needed, I didn't believe I deserved help anyway. So I didn't ask for it. And they didn't know to extend help.
Sure.
And be like, no, you must need something. So and I don't fault anyone. I just, it's just a matter of our own intricacies of relationships.
Yeah.
And, I know how much my family cares about me and did then. So I did deal with it alone, but a lot of that, and I realized, I knew then, but even more so now, a lot of that was just the shame keeping me, in my own space and not asking for anything.
I love that you're speaking to this because I think we do these gymnastics in our heads because we're very uncomfortable with gray areas. We like things to be black and white so we can stand firmly on a side, right? Because if it's gray, then we kind of have to stick around to see what's going to happen. How it's we can't just compartmentalize it completely and say, okay, that's in its box. It's done, right? If you had gone out and, took a knife and intentionally murdered somebody, that's what you had intended to do.
Yeah.
That's clear cut. Everybody can sit there and say yeah, you should not have done that. And, the the punishment for that is this, that, or the other. And yeah, I've never even thought about doing that. That's crazy, you know? Whereas with something like this, I think we can see ourselves in your position so easily, right? Like it's very easy to imagine a night that just went horribly wrong and you didn't mean to, but it still happened. And so because of all of that, it's messy. It's not black and white. You can't stay on one side or the other. There is nuance to the situation. And we're really uncomfortable with grief as a society in general. I would say especially Western society. Like we really don't understand or know how to grieve long term, you know, and you kind of already spoke to this in that people's lives move on. And it's not that, you know, you need somebody to be checking in every day, but just acknowledging that you attend the funeral, but but that person is still mired in this, all of these feelings and emotions and the emotional roller coaster of grief for months, years afterwards. It changes people. And we don't like to contend with that either, because if people change, then we have to acknowledge that. And we just like things to stay the same because then it's easier, right? So I really do appreciate you speaking to that, because I think it is a big part of this. Did it frustrate you when people would kind of make that remark that it could have been them because it was flippant, or did you kind of understand that they were trying to wrap their heads around it in the moment?
I didn't get frustrated. I think I understood, like you're saying, you know, I understood how complicated the situation was.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not like I heard it all the time. Obviously, well, because then I stopped talking. You know, I just sound like I would go to a party and be like, "Hey, by the way," you know. That wasn't
Two truths and a lie.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So I knew that it was their way of connecting. And I appreciated that, of just being like, you know, of connecting with my experience.
Yeah.
So, I didn't get frustrated. I mean, again, I was so mired in the fact that I was the worst person on the planet that, I mean, it didn't matter what they said. I would have been like, I would never get frustrated with them because that's not a big deal, you know?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I do see how people were trying to connect and trying to let me see that they understood, you know, at least on one level.
Yeah.
I know that, or I don't know, but I can guess that the friends that I had and that we had, you know, some conversations while our other friend was in a coma, those were probably the ones that were the most hardest hit or impacted, because it changed all of our dynamic, obviously. And I am curious as to how they carried that, you know, because like when something tragic happens, it ripples, right? So wasn't just me.
Sure.
And it wasn't just my friend in the car. It was, you know, and I do wonder about that because we were so young. We also didn't have the language, especially then, you know, it's not like now where couldn't go on TikTok to figure out how to.
No, but truly.
But you know, like I was saying, like the post-traumatic growth, they didn't know that in 1994, right? So a lot of the things I've even gone through now that their psychology is, I'm like, oh, so that's what they're calling it, because they have been doing the research. I would have been a great research subject if I would have known.
Yeah.
I would have been.
Right?
So yeah.
Yeah. You know, space has to be held all around, because again, we're really uncomfortable in the tension of things, right? The duality of things, that two seemingly opposite things can exist at the same time.
And they do. I think they do more than
constantly.
We're
all walking contradictions on some level.
Right? Yeah. You're like, I need to work. I need to rest. Like just that alone is going on at the same time in your body. Right. Yeah. And when I finally was able to tease all of that out as I wasn't happening as I was going through it, but after I got further along and could reflect a little bit on my journey, and I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. Because people would ask, well, because I never got depressed. I never ideated. I always got to bed out every morning. I never even, I don't have that. I never did that. Yeah, right. Okay. So the shame, which I know a lot of people that have depression feel worthless, but mine was very specific.
Yeah.
So at this, I'm an optimistic person. I found, when I started doing the work and really researching, I'm like, okay, the meaning's in the moment, and so there was a piece of me where I could always find peace in the moment that would battle the other pieces of me that were like, you're a horrible person because you let the yogurt expire on your refrigerator. How could you do that? There are starving people in the world. How could you ever do that? And then I would cry because it would just be this, you are a horrible person.
Yeah. It's reinforcing.
Right? Because I let the yogurt expire. But I could go out in the garden and have a moment and know that life is fluid and it ebbs and flows. And, you are not the thing you did. You are more than the one thing, right? So in one day, I could go back and forth between those things.
Yeah.
And that's how I lived my 20s, pretty much. One of the ways, but it made me who I am, which I'm happy with who I am right now. So, and that is still sometimes hard. It's sometimes being able to say that I'm happy who I am, especially after where my story begins. There's still there's a tug of a thread that's like, hi,
Are you?
Yeah. Or should you be allowed to be, but I am, and
good.
So yeah, duality, we definitely live in it. And I actually think acknowledging it is so powerful. I think it's really, really helped me find more deeper meaning in life and compassion for people and acceptance and
freedom.
Freedom, definitely. Freedom's huge. So I think it's been a good thing to live in that way.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah, your 20s, it's interesting because I would say that my experiences that really shaped my life also happened in my 20s, obviously wildly different. But your 20, something I often say is your 20s are already so hard and so filled with doubt and who the hell am I? Mm-hmm. And then to add trauma on top of it is just this extra whipped cream and cherry that you didn't ask for and you didn't want in your life. And so I do think that if you choose to do work and heal, that it sets you up for fantastic 30s. That's what I can speak to. But if you don't, it just keeps going, right? It doesn't end. If you don't do any of the work to heal, you won't heal. It doesn't just magically appear. It's a lot of work, right? So yeah, I think it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to go through any time. But I feel for people in their 20s who are experiencing those life-changing moments because it is a specific type of being lost, I think, because everything around you already feels so big and scary and hard.
Yeah. I had moved because I was lost.
Yeah.
And I knew I believed I wasn't going to find it. I was like, well, let me go take a year off and just kind of be. And then, because I knew I wanted to write, but I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what even that meant, So I moved because I didn't know the world was too big and I didn't have enough direction. The one direction I got, and first and foremost, I was like, well, I need to work on this interior world that I didn't realize existed until June 9th, 1994. I'm like, oh, it's so much bigger in here than I thought it was.
Roomy.
It expanded to the amount of things I could think and emotions I could have. And so I was like, I have to start there. I'm career whatever. Like it'll be what it is, because I knew because I'm a poet first, and I knew that poets there's no classifieds that time, didn't have jobs for poets, you know, so I knew my path was going to be whatever I was going to make it to be, and I could always work. I wasn't worried about it. The only thing I was worried about was finding some sort of peace within myself so that I could be there for other people too. You know, I definitely needed to rectify everything in here so that I could be a person in the world that, you know, that was more into giving. Because if I didn't fix it, then I knew that it was going to be an unhealthy thing that brought more chaos to the world, if you will. So I was working on trying to bring more peace to myself and an extension to the people around me. So so it gave me that direction, I will say.
Yeah. Which again, I think is remarkable to understand that, like, you know, I think sometimes our first instinct to try to fix internal things is to produce, right? It's like we're very much, our identities in our culture, our society, especially now, very much rooted in our production. Have been for a long time. I feel like the conversation's starting to change around that a little bit, I hope. But so I think that it's a very common road to go down, right? It's like, okay, well, I'm going to bury myself in something to try to prove my worth to everyone else. Because if everyone else can validate that I'm a good person and then I'm okay. Then
Well, and workaholics are still, that's an addiction, right?
Yeah.
So like, it's an addiction that society's accepted.
Exactly.
And that gives you, and then of course, then you accrue wealth, and success, which therefore society really tells you then you've won the game.
Right.
Like you have won the game.
Right.
Because you have this 401k or you have this house or whatever is it that you have. But it is just another form of addiction in the sense that you're trying to fill some sort of void.
Yeah.
And I agree with you about that. And I think for me, I didn't know that I was such a creative person, or that I really lived creatively. And it really hasn't even been to the last 5 years that I'm like, oh, I guess I am an artist. You know, I'm like, I'm a poet, but for some reason I always distinguish that as something different. Yeah. And I think because of that, like, I'm a creator, I'm not a consumer, just in who I am. And it's not, I mean, I have my ideas of what I think consumerism is and all of that, but that's getting into something as separate. But just the way I want to spend my time.
Yeah.
And my most productive time is when I'm not bound within that system, but I still produce, but I produce art, right? Now, the economy's like, oh, well, is that really productive? I don't know. We don't really call that productive. Yeah. I call it very hard work. Yeah. But so I think that was part of it too. I looking back, I'm like, oh, I think my creativity might have saved me on one level because I didn't do that. I didn't go ahead and become the producer.
Right. You weren't, like an accountant who was going to be the best accountant there ever was.
Exactly. Yeah. And look at all the things I've accrued, right? Yeah. And instead I really believed some of the base, like my philosophies went, the first one was in the Tao Te Ching. So Taoism, which is not a religion, I don't have any religious background or anything, but it's a philosophy, and it's just very simple, and it made a lot of sense to me. And it's just kind of a way of being in the world, just finding balance and fluidity. Of course, I have to, have a job, and, this is our society. And I did that. I did that well, I just didn't put myself into it. And when it became time for me to make choices, when I went to college, I majored in writing, and I was like, I'm pursuing this thing that I know is who I am in the world. Yeah. And even though it's not going to immediately make me, the income that somebody might be proud of, it's going to make me proud of myself. Yeah. And I will still produce whatever needs to be done in the world. But yeah, so my creativity is, I think, what saved me there.
I love that. actually. I love that so much. I love that it was important enough to you at the time that you didn't bury it. And I also think it's interesting it didn't become a part of your shame. Like,
well, it didn't, and
Okay.
it did and it didn't.
Okay.
So it took me 7 years, and I actually punished myself. And I was like, this is the thing you love to do the most. You don't get to do it.
okay.
So it took me, and now, which is true and not true, because I was telling him, it's like, you can't pursue it. You're not going to go to school. You're not going to take a class. But I would journal, and I
Okay.
would still write like poems that I actually have pulled out that I think I could put together a book for like middle school age. That's how not so great or not so prophetic that they are, but they actually are. They were still me trying to figure out things,
Yeah.
but they were very simple. So even I wasn't pursuing writing as a career, but I have to, it's just what I do.
Yeah.
So then I still have all these papers and journals. So I didn't go back to college until I was 27.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until then that I said, okay, you're allowed to do this now.
Okay.
So shame did get in the way, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
But all those years, I also had a child in that time, but all those years I was still processing through writing.
Yeah.
And I was, and all I was doing, mostly is like, why, pages and pages of why and imaginative stuff. So I was still processing, which is good. It just wasn't with intentionality. So I didn't get intentional until I went back to 27.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was still there.
But it was still there.
Yeah.
But I did tell myself,
But you
don't
did, you punished yourself.
I did. I was like, you love this, you don't get it.
Yeah. That's so sad. So did you go to visit your friend while he was in the hospital? Actually, I don't know if you said the gender. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, he was.
He was in the hospital?
No, I was not wanted by the family. Did not want me around, so I did not see him at all until how many years later? I think it was 5 or 6 years later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So did you have any communication with the family?
No.
Okay.
They made it very clear. Even the friends that my friends went to the hospital, but even they were, after a while, the family felt very strong that we were all, the bad influencers. And so I know that he kept in contact with a few people because we worked at the same place from that job, and some like the owners, some other people, but the few of us that were friends, I don't know, they just slowly didn't want anything,
Yeah.
They just made it difficult. Yeah, they made it difficult. And my friends, we were, again, young, and they knew they didn't want me there. And I know they went for a while, but slowly it was just hard.
Yeah.
Because they just weren't wanted there. And and they were grieving in their own way too. So.
Yeah. So 5 or 6 years later, you ended up seeing him. How did that happen?
He called me.
Oh, wow.
And asked if I could go to lunch. And so I left my house immediately after the phone call and went to his house, and his mother and his sister was there. And his mom said to me, she said, the only reason you're here is because he found your number on his own. She said, he asked us and we didn't think it was the best for him and we wouldn't help him. But he found your number, called the operator. I don't know exactly what. I was like, so they hadn't changed their minds.
Yeah.
And I respected, everybody has to do what they have to do to get through this thing we call life that's really hard. And so I picked him up. He showed me his bedroom. And we went to lunch, and he had an aide. He didn't drive. He'd learned how to, he was walking, and he had paralysis, not enough paralysis, but from a stroke. So he had trouble articulating, and I don't know obviously since I wasn't allowed in, I don't know the extent of everything, but he could dress himself and he participated. And so we went to lunch, and I just, was in awe of sitting there, really. And he reached for my hand across the table to tell, and he said, I forgive you. And he said, it wasn't your fault. So, and he just kept saying that. And, told me, he didn't remember the night. And he couldn't articulate too much about all of it. And so I don't know what was in him that made him know that I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
Because, I didn't ask complicated questions. And he could have said whatever. Like, he could have told me he hated me. I didn't know what he was going to say. And I was taking whatever it was. So that was amazing and more than I could have ever asked for. And then we finished lunch and I dropped him off and that was it. There was no, let's do this again. There was no, he said what he had to say.
Yep. And
I know that was probably hard because his parents didn't want him to. And I know that how much he loved his parents. They didn't see eye to eye for sure beforehand, but I know how much he cared about them. And of course they cared for him. So, and that was it.
Yeah. That was the last time you saw him.
Yeah. I saw him a couple times in town randomly.
Oh, okay.
Just,
but not like getting together.
Yeah. No, there was no getting together. And one time he didn't even see me. The other time he was with his mom and it was just kind of a high, weird, awkward thing.
Yeah.
But that was it, But for his part, that was, I don't know how the strength the wherewithal that he had to, to come up with on his own, to defy his parents too, knowing that they didn't want it, but knowing that it meant something to him. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
And so it I can tell you it helped.
Yeah.
So,
because at that point you were still punishing yourself.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You hadn't really dug into your healing yet.
No, not. I had been doing some work, but I had also gotten a lot of nothing's linear, right? So it's not like I was like on this straight track.
Yeah, that doesn't exist.
It did teach me that, the difference between physical injury and emotional injury. It's like he's further along in his healing journey than I am.
Yeah.
In some ways. He was hurt worse in this physical sense. But because of him being, have obviously its own challenges that I'd never had, but just the differences, between emotional trauma and physical trauma. And I don't know if he had other emotional trauma with it, obviously, but
sure.
He was talking about his dad and, just all how he, because he went back to work. The place we worked at let him work there, like in the morning when nobody was there and like set table, gave him a sense of life.
Yeah.
Because he had worked there for a long time. And so he had kind of, he had his sense of humor. So like there was still this piece of him.
Yeah.
I think that, that personality piece that survived, thankfully. And so I don't know if he hung on to what I was like, it was just different. And it's just this recognition of how I feel like he was worse off. And it almost looked like he felt like I was worse off, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So just an interesting human.
It's very interesting.
It's
very interesting because I think there's a couple of pieces to that. First is that, we can see physical, we can't see emotional, right? So like we've already talked about, people's lives move on. Mm-hmm. Less so, it does, but less so if you have a physical ailment or injury. And that is not to diminish at all anybody's physical injury. I don't want that to come off like that. And I don't think that, qualifying pain and suffering is anything anybody should be doing. And I just want to make it clear that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, no, not at all.
But I do think that it's easier for us to see something and react to it rather than be constantly in tune to the fact that like hey, she looks fine, but she might be dying inside.
Exactly.
The other thing I think is like, and again, I just think this speaks to our nature of trying to compartmentalize and tie things up with a bow as much as possible is, you know, for him, it was very black and white, right? Like he was a passenger in the car and it happened to him. He was fairly passive in the whole experience outside of your, you know, key toss game before getting into the car. And like, yes, everybody makes decisions, but the actual event itself, he was a passive participant, whereas you are not. And so, you know, those are really uncomplicated feelings when it's completely like, again, black and white. Yeah. Somebody can look at him and be like, I'm so sorry that this happened to you, period, end. There's nothing more to say. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So it's not as complicated. It is complicated in certain ways, but emotionally and mentally, it's not as complicated.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And it doesn't necessarily come with self-hatred. It may in certain aspects.
The challenge, I mean, and I don't know because it's not a lived experience.
Exactly.
And the challenges, I mean, of course they're different because we were in very different positions and there's no way they could be similar. So, but seeing that, and, you know, I actually had a moment of envy that, again, not that I thought his life was simple or that it would have been simpler. It wasn't that. You know, he just seemed so much lighter in his personality, you know, because there was, I don't think in his state there was much of a filter because of his injury, you know, it was, and I just felt so heavy and weighted down.
Yeah.
And the fact that, and I think really when, you know, because he had this emotional strength to find me and say that he forgave me was more than I could ever do for myself. And I think that moment too, it's like, even with all of the challenges you've had over the past 5 or 6 years and the complications I can only imagine, but you still have the inner strength to do this.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't have all those other challenges. And I don't have that strength to do that. Right. Yeah. So I was, you know, there was a moment of awe and a little bit of envy and then also inspiration of like, okay, I think I can do that. You know, I'm gonna work for that. Trauma's, it's so complicated. Like you said, that's why these conversations are difficult to have because you have to tease it all out and people want to put a right and wrong. And there's really not a right and wrong. You know, I can wish that things had been different between his parents and I, but I don't, they had to choose their own path.
Yeah.
They're the ones that have to walk that and make choices and, you know, and live with their losses and their griefs and their caretaking. I didn't have to do that. So I don't begrudge them at all.
Yeah.
I can wish that some things were different, but I don't know. So it's like you get into that right and wrong, and that's where people get sticky because they want the black and white. So like sitting in this gray area, like we want to qualify. It's like not taking away from anybody, but but to talk about the difficulty in the gray, in sitting with it, because it's not clear, and that's okay. You know, that's part of it.
Yeah,
getting through to the other side and being like, okay, this is a little messy and sticky, and
absolutely. Yeah, I you know, going back to duality, I think even we as people are just, it's a constant state of being, right? Because, you know, we talk about community and then we talk about individualism and we talk about the things that bring us together and the things that separate us. And both are important because the things that bring us together, the things that we have in common, they connect us. But the things that make us different from one another enable us to have unique perspectives and experiences and allow us to learn from each other. So it's all important. And I think, you know, your story to an extent speaks to the fact that people can have the same experience and walk away with completely different perspectives on it. And that's okay. That's valid. and for many different reasons, right? That happens. But I think it's important that we talk about or we recognize the value in, you have shared experience with somebody, you went through something together, you can both speak to what that meant to you and how it changed your life. But if your answers are completely different, that doesn't disqualify one of you over the other, right? Like they're both completely true and valid.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like we're all walking. I guess it's not duality because there's a lot of people, but
billions.
I don't know what that number would be, but that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And and that whole, the value judgment, the good and bad it can, especially when you're getting into interpersonal, like I know we have laws and you have to have a line somewhere. And but when it comes to value judging like somebody else's experience against yours, or like, and trying to parse, good and bad, even just like my husband always makes fun of me, or not always, but like, because people are like, what's your favorite this? And I'm like, I'm not a favorite person. I'm like, so you have to tell me I can't like 99% of the other things? What day of the week is it?
Right?
What is it, summer? Because I like, different ice cream in summer than I do in the winter. I mean, like, what is that? Like, why are we always like, it has to be this? This is good, it has to be the best.
Right.
That means something has to be the worst, which, okay, but I don't know. Like, for me, this is how I spent my 20s, just thinking about all these things. What does that mean? I don't understand what good means. What does it mean to be a good person? That was like my question of the 20s, and so anyway, yes, it's mired, and we're all living in our own individual worlds, but we're living in them in community, and trying to make that community work in such a way there's some symbiotic or symbiosis, right? So that it's a nice ecosystem, if you will, would be I think, if it was healthy. And that's not easy, but that's why things like, what you're doing is stories are important. Like hearing people's experience and being like, this is where we have in common. And we depart here, but that's not a bad thing.
No.
It's just.
And I can learn from that.
And I can learn from that. Yeah. That's our individualness within the community, because we are both individuals and we're in community.
Right.
So we have to be both parts.
Exactly. And I think, not to beat the point to death, but I do think when we acknowledge that there is a vast number of experiences or a vast number of answers to a question. And again, like you said, there are certain things that, you have to draw the line. There are certain things that are objective, and I get that, but that's not what we're talking about. And so when we decide that we ourselves get to become the experience police for other people and say, well, that's not my experience, so that can't be your experience. Or like, well, my mom died too, and like, so the way that you're dealing with your mom's death is totally inappropriate because that's not how I dealt with my mom's death. I shouldn't have picked that because my mom hasn't actually died, and now it's making me really uncomfortable.
Oh, sorry.
You didn't do anything. I did that to myself. Anyway, the way that we draw everything back to ourselves, which I think can be a really healthy thing to do if we understand that we have different ways of experiencing the world and different lenses that we're looking at it through. And so there are things that I will never know. I will never know what it's like to be certain people in certain parts of the world living at certain times. And that's okay, but I still have to acknowledge that whatever their lived experience is the truth. So, yeah. When did you decide to start talking about your story?
I first decided to start writing about it since I'm a writer. That's my form of talking.
Yep.
It's my first form of talking.
Fair.
But I first decided when I was 24. My first son was born when I was 23, and I was in an unhealthy relationship with his father. And I was like, I had this responsibility. And I knew it was going to take me a long time to heal and to get to the point. But I was like, I don't want this story. I want to, if I can use this story to help one person, whether that person doesn't get in the car, whether it has anything to do with drinking and driving or whatever, I want to help one person at least. So I don't know what that looks like. I did take 2 public speaking classes in college because I was deathly afraid of being in front of people. So I obviously was, because I thought I was going to be a teacher. One of the things I wanted to do was teach high school. So like I was working on that. But then I still buried it in my writing, even because I did my undergraduate at UNC Wilmington in poetry. And I actually, the very last poem I wrote for my very last class before graduation, I wrote about the crash. And they all, because I've been writing about like my divorce and, whatever. The whole class just looks at me. Some of them were crying, because it was a very raw, and it's the scene. And they're just like, what? Like this whole time? You've had all of this bottle. Like I waited because I was so afraid. And then when I went to graduate school, it was the first poem, that same poem was the first poem I submitted to my first workshop in graduate school. I was like, I need to lead with this. So I knew I was going to write about it. Even with my first book, I buried it with 3 other narratives and it didn't work. So finally I pulled that out and wrote, I thought I was going to write a memoir. I didn't want to, but my brain wanted me to. Which is what does happen in writing. It is when people say it's a character talking or this form shaped itself. It's like it just does. Like I was like, I just graduated with my master's in poetry, and now I'm writing 200 pages of nonfiction. Like because my brain's like sentences. Like it's pretty awesome to experience it. It was frustrating at the time. So my first was writing, and then I had my first book come out in 2021, and that's all. It's a shame-based. It's my shame-based book. You don't get a lot of reprieve in that book. Yeah. Because I wanted it to mimic what shame feels like in that way. My second book comes out actually in September, and that's the forgiveness book. So there's they're like my dual minds, my dual interior narratives. I decided speaking about it in front of people has been on my list for about 5 years. Like, does anybody, you get through like, does anybody care? Is it something I should do? What am I going to say? And I was still working through being public. The first time I ever read the poems in public, I was like outside of like a literary community. Sure. There's lots of trauma stories in literary communities. So you kind of just get thrown in the mix, but to read it to just anybody that walks in the door. But it was I had my friends with me. I had my armor on, and it was great. And I've gotten better at it, of course. And now I bring shame into the room when I do a reading. I actually intentionally talk to people about how I'm bringing shame into the room. And so I think it's just been over the last couple of years. And then I started coaching, doing like life coaching, and I've started doing some community coaching work. And it was always there, and then it never went away, and it got stronger. And as I am, especially through that forgiveness part, and I actually think forgiveness is a really good conversation to be having right now in our country. So I just felt now that I've gotten both lines of the shame and forgiveness kind of figured out for myself, because I have to have it figured out for myself. I can't just go out and, I mean, not that it's completely figured out, but you know what I mean? Yes. To an extent. I was like, I think this might be a thing. Like, I think I actually can do this. Yeah. I mean, I know I can do like I don't have the ability to, like, I'll study and I'll learn how to do all the things, but I felt like I felt more and more confident that I had something that I could share to bring people to the conversation, because there aren't as many people, like you said in the beginning, that talk about my side of the story. Yeah. Because I've heard stories that had nothing to do with drinking and driving, but stories where people lived with deep shame because this woman, the car slipped on ice. Yeah. Right? Just the random, because life has so many accidents involved. Yes. And how do we rectify that within ourselves? And how do we think about forgiveness? And, so I just realized that since I had done this work, and I am a writer and I'm writing about it, that to reach a broader, group of people. Obviously, poetry is a very small portion of the population that read poetry, but that I would see if the speaking thing would.
I don't know. There's some poetry that's gone viral in recent years, so who knows?
That's true.
You might be
That's true
on that list. And I think what you're talking about is specifically very important for. I mean, I don't know when it wouldn't be important, but I think shame thrives in isolation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of counts on the fact that we're not talking about it. It's like I almost imagine it like this person in your life that is like an abuser, basically, who's like telling you all of these things about yourself and banking on the fact that it's too embarrassing to go ask somebody else what they think.
Yeah.
Right? Like they've got you so cornered and so like downtrodden that it's impossible to even think about bringing up that conversation with somebody else just because of what they might think of you.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that speaking truth and life to, working through shame and ridding yourself of shame is incredibly important. I think it's something we still struggle with. We all struggle with a lot of things, but shame is still one of those things that I feel like we don't necessarily talk about in a healthy or productive way, with forgiveness attached to it, especially for ourselves, with grace and compassion attached to it. No matter how many times you say, like, don't be ashamed, you can't like muscle your way through that. It's going to take work, and it's going to take the softness, right? It's not something that you can do by sheer brute force.
No, you have to give yourself room to, I think, because if you're feeling shame, that means you've done something wrong or you feel like, right? But shame tells you are wrong. Like it really deep, and so that kind of thinking, even if it's small somewhere, it permeates. Like it permeates, like I said, there's ripples to other people. It also permeates into how you show up. And so for me, part of this is, I'm like, who would I have been before? And I don't know. I want to be a teacher. So obviously I wanted to teach, and to be in conversation with people. And I wanted to write. And so like speaking of, since this is my story, right? This just ended up being, when I wanted to write, I'm like, oh God, I was so mad. I don't know how many times I've said, I'm like, I don't want this to be my story. I don't want this to be my story. But it is. And since it is, and I'm a writer, and at my heart, I'm a teacher or a coach, speaking is part of that. Like this, having conversation with you and talking about the human experience is all a part of all of those things. So I think it's part of who I am. What I thought I was going to be doing, and like before, in the before times, it's just manifested, which it does. That's life, right? And what I say is I've just followed the bouncing ball. I don't know. You're probably not old enough, but they still on TV, the bouncing ball. I guess, I don't know if they still did that on Sesame Street. So it's like I kind of, with my work and art, which I just follow the bouncing ball, like with intention. But art, you have to also allow yourself room to grow and to have. And not know exactly where the next step is going to be. That's part of what makes it so much fun and scary and all of that. And so this has led me, and every time I kept steering my ship towards where I'm at right now, the sailing was smooth, So I'm going to continue doing that until the sailing's not smooth, or I don't know.
No, I think that's awesome. I admire the commitment to that way of living, because I think that it's easy to get caught up once again in the, who am I going to be? What am I going to do? I have to have it all figured out, and I can't change my mind, and I can't, veer off the course. And sometimes, just being open to wherever life takes you, even, when the hiccups or the bad things happen, and and it shifts your course. You know, you didn't run off to Costa Rica.
I did not.
So that was an option.
It was an option.
But you didn't do that, but you did, you know, you took other opportunities that were available to you that actually helped you and furthered you and helped, you know, the humanity in general, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's hard, you know, life's hard. Everybody's living for the first time. And so we all have to make our choices and we all have to contend with them. And sometimes we don't make the right choices. And then it just becomes, how do we change, how do we move forward? Not forgetting that, but not letting it define us either. And I think to a certain extent, obviously most of that work is done internally, but there is a sense of community that needs to happen around that as well. There does need to be people that come around you and validate that you're still a person and you're still deserving of love, dignity, and respect.
It's super important. Yeah. That's why, whether it's group work or your family or volunteering, you know, whatever that is, to validate just your worthiness within society and your equality within people is deeply important. And I was lucky I have a lot of support at home. You know, I've kind of always been honest with who I am and what I need and what my path is, whatever that looks like. And luckily I have a lot of support in that. But I've opened up a lot more in the last couple of years. I think getting that first book out was because the world didn't catch on fire.
Sure.
I didn't catch on fire.
Right?
Like, it's like, okay, it's in the world. I mean, I know maybe 100 people read it, but it's still like anybody could if they wanted to, right? It's like waiting for, you know, the next shoe to drop, really.
Sure.
And it didn't. So I've since then been able to opened me up more as a person. Like, I've been more involved in the community, which just gives back more and feeds. And I see the more that I give, you know, of course, you know how that works. And I'm not doing it to get, but I'm supported in other ways. And that's how I feel like this work, if I can give as much of that grayness, some voice in the story, and probably say some wrong things because it's sticky and it moves and it's not perfect. My intention is, you know, always to just share and to help and to hopefully, you know, if anybody can hear and feel a little less alone at home. Yeah. Because of anything that they've done or had done to them or just whatever that feeling is, then that's, you know, it's worth all whatever. It's worth everything to me, you know, because I know that when I listen to it, you know, because it's not like I did it by myself. I'm a reader, so I'd read lots of books. Obviously, podcasts didn't exist then. But as soon as they did, you know, but I would just get as much information as possible in here. And I, you know, even reading novels, you get other people's experiences. Yeah. And I would learn, I love learning from novels. And so, like, I was never alone because I fed myself in those ways as well. And I think that's super important in addition. Yeah. I just want to add to it.
Agreed. Absolutely. And, you know, I think it's also the thing that you're never going to please everyone.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, if we try to curate ourselves, and I'm totally guilty of this, if we try to curate ourselves so much so as not to, like, offend anybody, then, you know, what message are we actually carrying? Yeah. What point are we actually communicating? Is it all just a waste of time then? And I saw something a couple of years ago that, like, really spoke to me, and it was just a reminder, you are not meant for everybody.
Yeah.
And I love that because it allows you to just move on then when somebody doesn't connect with your message. It's not for them. And that's okay. Somebody else's message is for them. They will connect with that. Yeah. And not that, you know, the negativity or vitriol can't be upsetting, but there are people that need to hear your story and your voice and who will be affected by it. And, you know, I have to believe that those people will find you. I have to believe that because I have my own medium where I'm hoping the right people find it, and it isn't for everybody.
No.
So, well, you just take it a day at a time. And as long as now I'm just throwing quotes and platitudes in, but one of my favorite quotes is, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it's by C.S. Lewis. And the gist of it is if you are setting out to write an original story, like you're not going to be able to do that. Like basically there are no original stories. But if you are setting out to tell the truth, you will, as a byproduct, create an original story because people will connect with that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's not the quote. And I terribly butchered it.
You paraphrased it, but you got the point across.
I know. I'm like, it's my favorite. And then I can't say it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's, for me, like the beauty of creating, because you're creating something, right? All the stories have been told. I mean, can you tell a new love story? No, you pretty much can't. But what you can do is take your human experience and filter through, because nobody wrote that story in 2025 on this, with whatever was going on. That's why they say all art is political, is because it is taking and absorbing what's going on in the culture. So even if you're not talking about politics, you're setting up how people lived in that culture, which eventually, can be called political, right? But that's what's the beauty of it, is you're getting snapshots in time throughout the world now, or I guess you always were, but now we can read them or watch them throughout the world. And that didn't, 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 200 years ago would have looked very different. And so it is telling the same kind of love story, but it looks very different and it feels different. And because of that experience of that individual and what they bring to that story, everything that happened before them in their life, right?
Yeah.
So it's super important to tell stories and to listen to stories.
Yeah. Tell stories, listen to stories, tell your truth.
Tell your truth and be vulnerable. I mean, it hasn't been easy in this world to, people, get very opinionated, as we know.
Yeah.
But I think the more we just be ourselves and tell our truths, and I mean, I do believe in being kind, and generous, but, that's the people I'm talking to.
And again, those are your people.
Those are my people.
Whoever doesn't connect with it, that's for them.
Of course.
That's on them. Something else is for them.
Something else is for them. That's why so many exist.
Exactly. Right. We can't all be doing the same thing. And because, Anyway, I do ask a last question to everybody. It's the only question that's the same for everybody. So through the lens of your experience, what does compassion mean to you?
Compassion. So for me, I think compassion starts with kind of putting the ego aside and putting expectation aside and allowing space for other people to just exist in their human experience, whatever that is. So in that, it's just so compassion is providing space for other people to be their true and honest selves. And if that means then they're being angry or they're crying or they're happy or and then that's great.
Yeah.
I think it's in addition, so when you do that, you're also not judging them. We're not, that goes back to that, this is good and bad, what they're doing. They're just doing it. I think that's why you can be compassionate for animals so easily, because you don't put a value judgment on the antelope, you're not like, you shouldn't have gone through that bush, right? It's a bad choice. Because it's easy, because we don't see ourselves in animals.
Yeah.
So I think putting away our own judgments and our own expectations of other people, which kind of means putting away your ego and just allowing that person there's some space. I think that's compassion.
Yeah. I agree. I definitely agree. I mean, I agree with your whole thing, but the the ego specifically, I think is such an important piece of that, for sure. Leaving it at the door.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Cheryl, I've loved talking to you, hearing your story. We're going to link to you in the show notes so people can find your books and, keep up with what you're doing. But what do you have out right now?
Well, I have my one book. It's called Anything That Happens. That was published in 2021. And then my next book, it's called Singing Riptide, comes out in September.
Awesome.
2025. Right now I have a website and I will be starting a Substack, hopefully this summer. I don't really do social media.
Yeah.
I'm not good at it.
Me either.
I'm really bad at it. I am thinking about, I have a YouTube channel and I've thought about doing something there. But for now, it's really everything would be on my website. And I will be doing a Substack because I have a lot of unpublished pieces I'm going to start putting out. So
nice.
That'll be the two main places for now.
Yeah. Substack's blowing up too.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's fantastic. We will definitely link to you there so people can find you, hopefully find their new favorite poet.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, for hosting it in your home also. Thank you. And yeah, I just keep spreading that message because it really is, it is for somebody.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And thank you for having me and coming all this way. And this is a great conversation on this cloudy day.
Yeah, this cloudy Memorial Day.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Human Experience. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with your friends and family, share it on social media, and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also support the podcast financially by going to my website, thehxpod.com, linked in the show notes, and clicking on Donate. It takes a lot of time and resources to create this podcast, so every little bit helps. Everyone has a story, and I'd love to hear yours. So be sure to check out the show notes for more information about how to stay in touch. Do good and love well.